I often feel pretty inadequate with myself and whatever I'm doing. Wins, losses, accomplishments, setbacks, they kind of start to blur together and I really can't tell the difference between them. Last year in 2022, coming into 2023, I remember I had negative money in the bank. And for those of you who don't know, that means you're in overdraft. It means you're a brokey, a proper brokey. You owe the bank money. And I had I had dreams, but I didn't know how to chase them. And this year has been an absolute train wreck because I keep disappointing myself and I keep wandering aimlessly. And when I do get a plan, it's like I cave into the idea that I'm inadequate and that nothing matters. And I've even made videos about it on this channel. I made a video about being a failure and inadequacy, and an element of that comes from me, but an element of that also came from other people. That video was more so on the other people side of things, and I guess this is more on the me side of things. I can turn a drop of water that was a failure into a tsunami of problems for myself just by allowing it to grow. The awareness of this sometimes isn't even enough to prevent it. And part of the problem is that I let my problems get to me. I let the heat of the moment, I let all of the surroundings come in and make me feel a certain way or make me do a certain thing that makes me realize that, oh, like this is such a massive problem in the moment. I've got to do this and I've got to be hasty or I've got to be desperate trying to scramble my way back. And it can cost me time, it can cost me energy, and it can actually cost me money in in a surprising amount of times this year. It can cost me money. And part of a big burden of that problem, or a big part of that problem, is I allow the world to affect me sometimes. I allow my external environment to come in and rain down what other people think of me, what I think I should do in comparison to what other people are doing in the world. And it makes me close in and just squeeze all my potential, squeeze every bit of energy I have into something it shouldn't be, and then it pops, and then you have a massive problem. I become a lot more cynical, I become a lot more pessimistic, and I've started to revert, I would say, back to my factory settings. I've started to go back into thinking nothing really matters, that the world is gonna end anyway, and so my inevitable failure or me not chasing my dreams is perfectly fine, because either way I'm gonna get from here to 80 or I'm gonna get from here to heaven, so it doesn't matter. And it was so strange because thinking about death, thinking about losing my life and thinking, okay, if I did go today, what would I leave behind? Who would remember me? What would they remember me for? Would they remember me for like YouTube videos like this? Would this be what's immortalized as, Mr. Eggbay's this is my call to glory, this is the last stand? Or would they remember me for doing something different? Or would they remember me for being someone different? And it made me reflect on some of the smaller choices I've made. And the fact that I don't actually remember a lot of the smaller choices I've made. I just wished them away. But at the time, I blew them out of proportion. And this has caused me to be a bit of a nihilist. I don't want to say the word nihilism because I'm not a nihilist per se, because there are certain aspects of life I do believe nihilism is pretty useful. And it has led me to be a little bit nihilistic in the way that I think about things. I was actually asked the other day, am I a nihilist, by someone? And my answer was like, kind of yes, kind of no. For the small stuff, yes. For the big stuff, no. And by the end of the conversation, he did change my mind. But my perspective up until that point was simply, this doesn't matter because it is simply a small drop. But those small drops are the things that will create the ripples, that will create the tsunamis at the end of the day. You cannot create a tsunami without a drop of water to begin. And it's those accumulated things, it's those accumulated small habits, it's those accumulated aims that you try and chase your goal, that you try and chase your dreams, that eventually you get something where it's big enough to say, this is a cup of water that you can drink. Without that, all of our actions are just singular drops of water scattered around, disorganized, unable to create a statue of the life that we've lived. We won't remember things, we won't remember small things, and we shouldn't blow them out of proportion. We shouldn't allow the small things to bind us up so we create bigger problems. But at the same time, we shouldn't allow the small things to chase us by and to whisper away. Because if every time something small happens, you bound it up into a tsunami of problems, then that's bad. But at the same time, if every time something small happens, you slowly gather it drop by drop and you begin to create something, you might have a tsunami of good coming your way. But this is just to say that you won't remember this conversation in a week or a month or a year or however long. But it doesn't mean that you should give up on the pursuit of taking these small individual lessons, small individual experiences, and gathering them up to create a life that's worth living, to create a life that you don't feel, to create a life that you feel adequate, to create a life that you feel like you can achieve something. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. If we're all going to die and we're all going to leave this earth, if speaking as a nihilist, which I'm not, but you get my point, we might as well try and live a good life. We might as well try and live a life that we feel we can be proud of. Wow.